News 9 Plus. Download now.
Hello and a very good morning to all News 9 viewers. I'm Neha Bhan and we continue our coverage of the Israel-Hamas war here on News 9. In the latest, tens of thousands of people in Gaza have moved in a southern direction to seek refuge following Israel's evacuation warning. The defense forces also carried out localized raids in the Gaza Strip. Both sides have suffered heavy casualties. Over 1,300 Israelis have lost their lives, while over 1,900 Palestinians have been killed. We begin with the latest. That's the Israel Defense Forces, in fact, have confirmed that they carried out localized raids over the past 24 hours in the Gaza Strip. Now, this came ahead of an anticipated ground offensive in the war-hit region of Gaza. A statement from the IDF stated, and I quote, "Over the past 24 hours, IDF, the Israeli military forces, carried out localized raids inside the territory of the Gaza Strip to complete the effort to cleanse the area of terrorists and weaponry. During these operations, there was also an effort to locate missing persons." That's what the statement read. Now, it's important to note that Hamas has taken several Israeli forces hostage and is using them to deter Israeli attacks on Gaza. However, the Israeli forces are continuing with their attacks on the Gaza Strip. In fact, they have categorically stated that they are going to teach Hamas a befitting lesson. Despite this, Israeli forces have in fact continued their operation to respond to the Palestinian terrorist organization Hamas. This was another attempt made by the Israeli forces to rescue hostages. Do remember that this war was initiated by Hamas, and today marks a week since an unprecedented assault was launched on the people of southern Israel after Hamas fired thousands of rockets into the Israeli territory, sparking an unprovoked war. Now, since then, the Israel has launched numerous counter-offensives in Gaza where many Hamas terrorists have sought shelter. The Hamas terrorists have carried out brutal attacks against the people of Israel, sparing not even the youngest children, not even, in fact, the babies have been spared by the Hamas terrorists. The Israeli forces carried out localized raids over the past 24 hours in the Gaza Strip. Do remember that the Gaza residents were asked to evacuate immediately by the Israeli forces. And now numerous people, tens of thousands of people, according to reports, have moved towards, in fact, the southern side, towards the southern direction to seek refuge following Israel's evacuation order. Hamas, on the other side, have asked people of Gaza to not pay any heed to the evacuation warning. But here we have reports suggesting that tens of thousands of people have already started evacuating and they are moving in a southern direction to seek refuge following Israel's evacuation warning. Do remember that this was an unprovoked war. Last Saturday is when Hamas fired thousands of missiles towards the Israelis, in fact, and Israeli territory. And Israel vowed to retaliate in a manner that the coming ages would remember for years to come. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has time and again stated that this time the kind of Israeli forces will eradicate Hamas. The Hamas terrorists are also using the people of Gaza as human shield. They are using babies as human shield. There are many such stories that have in fact been shared on various social media platforms. The Israeli Defense Forces are also planning an anticipated ground offensive in the war-hit region of Gaza. Gaza Strip, in fact, is occupied by over 2 million Palestinians living in an extremely cramped conditions. Now, despite Israeli warnings to leave the strip, it is not going to be easy for the Palestinians to do so, although there are many who have already started moving towards the southern direction. Towards, in fact, the southern side to seek refuge following Israel's evacuation warning. Do remember that neighboring Egypt is only allowing a trickle of refugees to enter its land. We've seen from the past experiences that civilian casualties in such cases are simply unavoidable. Large number of Gaza citizens still trapped in the city, even though Israel has asked them to evacuate. It is also important to note that the ground invasion will be dangerous for the IDF as well, given the likelihood that Hamas is prepared for an extended siege. But it looks like that the Israeli government is well prepared to do so, and they are going to take the Hamas terrorists head on. The terrorist organization Hamas is stated to have a large supply of anti-tank weapons, mines and drones that will allow it to carry out unconventional warfare against Israeli forces in its home turf. Now, there's also a likelihood that the Hamas will make full use of the hostages it has taken as human shields against Israeli forces, against Israeli attacks. Do remember that the latest development that we are sharing with you regarding the Israeli Defense Forces, confirming that they have carried out localized raids, was in fact a bid to ensure to locate the missing persons. At least one journalist has been killed and 6 wounded, including 2 Al Jazeera reporters, in a shelling by Israeli forces in southern Lebanon, according to witness at the scene. Now, the Reuters news agency also confirmed on Friday that one of its videographer was killed in the attack. The videographer has been identified as Issam Abdullah. The group of journalists, including from Al Jazeera and AFP, were working near Alma al-Sahab, close to the Israel border, where the Israeli military and Lebanese militia Hezbollah have been trading fire in border clashes. As I was just mentioning that civilian casualties in such cases are simply unavoidable. These brave journalists were reporting from the war zone. And that's the latest that we're getting. Very unfortunate information right here that at least 1 journalist has been killed and 6 others have been injured, including 2 Al Jazeera reporters, in a shelling by Israeli forces in southern Lebanon. Now, this is what the witnesses, various witnesses, have shared with many media organizations. The Reuters news has confirmed that Issam Abdullah, a videographer, was killed in the attack. Right on your screens, the photograph of the young journalist who was killed. There are 6 others who also have been injured. They've been shifted to hospital, and we still don't have an update as to what exactly their condition is, but we hope for their speedy recovery. Now, the group of journalists, including from Al Jazeera and AFP, were working near Alma al-Sahab. This is close to the Israeli border, where the action is taking place, where the Israeli military as well as the Lebanese militia Hezbollah have been trading fire in border clashes. That's Israel-Hamas war day 8. Death toll has risen to 3,200. That's what, in fact, we're seeing here at the casualties on both ends. Israel Defense Forces have conducted localized raids in Gaza. That's the sum up of what we have shared with our viewers so far. Now, Hamas is telling people to ignore the evacuation order. Today marks exactly a week since this unprovoked war was started. Operation Ajay has brought back second batch of Indians from Israel. That's the latest that, in fact, we're sharing with all our viewers. These are some of the updates on day 8 of the Israel war with Hamas. Amid the war between Israel and the Palestinian militant group, Palestinian terrorist group Hamas, another batch of stranded Indians were brought back to India on Saturday as part of the country's ongoing repatriation mission, Operation Ajay. The special chartered flight with the second batch of 235 Indian nationals, including 2 infants, took off from, in fact, Israel at 11:02 p.m. That's the local time. They've been brought back. Do remember that yesterday was when the first batch of stranded Indians were brought back to India, and now stranded Indian nationals were brought back to the country, and now today the second batch has arrived.
I never seen this type of situation in my life. So Israeli people are
Thank you so much, Government of India, Operation Ajay, the whole team and the team IGCI for helping us taking our homeland safely. Thank you so much.
पिछले 2 साल से इजराइल में रह रहा हूँ और सब कुछ वहाँ अच्छा ही था. लास्ट 2 वीक्स बहुत ही बेकार गया हमारा, बट अभी सब कुछ अच्छा है. हम यहाँ अपने देश में आ गए वापस. अब हमें अच्छा लग रहा है.
ये तो बहुत अच्छा मुहिम है. मैं इसके लिए धन्यवाद भी मैं करता हूँ गवर्नमेंट को भी, और जो भी हमारे प्राइम मिनिस्टर नरेंद्र मोदी जी हैं उनको भी, और विदेश मंत्री और इजराइल एम्बेसी को मैं सबको धन्यवाद देता हूँ. इट्स वंडरफुल and we are very happy for the initiative, and many thanks to Ministry of External Affairs, Dr. Jai Shankar, Government of India. So Jai Hind.
The second batch of stranded Indians were brought back to India on Saturday as part of the country's ongoing repatriation mission, Operation Ajay. And in fact, these people who were brought back to safety were also seen chanting Vande Mataram in the flight, and they thanked the Ministry of External Affairs for bringing them back. Around 18,000 Indians are currently present in Israel, and the External Affairs Minister S. Jai Shankar has categorically stated that India will facilitate the return of those who wish to come back to India and will do anything and everything to safeguard its citizens. Now, Gaza has suffered immense damage with the continuous airstrikes from Israel. This is not the first time Gaza has come under fire from Israel. It has always been a violence-ridden zone. My colleague Kartikeya Sharma tells you more about the battleground which Gaza has always been.
Through the graphic on the screen, I'll tell you what the Gaza is all about. So first of all, the municipality of Gaza was established in 1893. It was part of the Ottoman Empire. That's the first part. Gaza is 230 square miles with a population of about 2.3 million people, densely packed area. Israel took control of Gaza in 1967, post-war. Before that, it was with Egypt. It was governed by Egypt, and the transfer took place after 67 when Israel took it over. Israel controlled Gaza for 38 years and had 21 settlements there. 21 settlements there. Under Oslo Accord, civilians and security authority was passed on to the Palestinian Authority. Israel withdrew from Gaza in 2005. 2005 till 2005, Israeli forces were inside Gaza. Israel continues to control the land and the maritime border of Gaza. So it's not as if, there is free movement from Gaza. It's controlled. Israel's withdrawal from Gaza was preceded by Intifada, but that's another story, not for today. I'm talking about 2001. Ariel Sharon was Israel's prime minister then. That's a bit of a history, but important. 9,000 Israeli citizens had to leave Gaza. They were resettled because Israel thought this is too much of forces required to protect them. Now today, Gaza is governed by Hamas and the West Bank by Fatah. Both don't speak to each other. They are breakaway branch of the Palestinian movements. Now this is what I say, the sense of living, to describe it to our viewers. 90% of water of Gaza's sole aquifer is not potable, so they don't have drinking water. They have to get it from outside. So imagine, you live in a place where you have water, but you can't drink it. The vegetables comes from outside. 95% of the Gaza also do not have access to clean water. The electricity comes from outside. So the city is dependent on Israel. 40% of the Gaza's population is less than 15-year-old. So we are talking about the demography. So which means that half of the men are out, and Gaza Strip is roughly 1/4 the size of Delhi. So imagine how densely packed this place is. I am giving you a sense of geography. And Hamas has 25,000 fighters in its military wing, the terrorist organization Hamas, which has led to killing of the innocent. And the Islamist group Al-Quds also has its presence in Gaza. I use the word Islamist because Al-Quds is part of IRGC. But the objectives are Islamist in region. IRGC is an official player in Tehran, directly reporting to the supreme leader. And Al-Quds is the foreign hand of it. Qasem Soleimani was one of its general. Today, a different man takes care of Quds forces. Gaza is surrounded by heavily fortified perimeters. If I am not wrong, there is a 3-kilometer buffer zone, So this was what was breached. This was what was breached. So today's story is ground attack, Gaza. Now when we talk about ground attack Gaza, what is the biggest challenge for Israel for a ground operation of such a scale? That's my question number one. Have civil and military targets in Gaza become one for Israel? That's number two. Associated Press reported that the parliament and ministries are just targets.
For all the viewers who have just joined us, that's the latest. The Israeli Defense Forces have confirmed that they carried out localized raids over the past 24 hours in the Gaza Strip. Now, this came ahead of an anticipated ground offensive in the war-hit region of Gaza. Moving on now, incoming rocket sirens are sounding in Tel Aviv and surrounding suburbs, as well as in the southern coastal city of Ashdod. There are no immediate reports of injuries or damage in the latest rocket barrage from the Gaza Strip. As the sirens wailed, residents sought shelter, anxiously waiting the outcome of the attack. However, there have been no immediate reports of injuries or damage resulting from this particular rocket assault. The repeated incidents of rocket fire have instilled fear and uncertainty among the residents of Tel Aviv and Ashdod. Right on your screens, the visuals coming in from Tel Aviv where rocket sirens, incoming rocket sirens were sounded in Tel Aviv and surrounding suburbs, as well as in the southern coastal city of Ashdod. There are no immediate reports of injuries or damage in the latest rocket barrage from the Gaza Strip. Residents seen running to take a shelter, anxiously awaiting the outcome of the attack. So far, fortunately, no loss of life or injury has been reported. There are no such immediate reports, particularly depicting or stating the number of casualties or injuries that have taken place from this particular rocket assault. However, the repeated incidents of rocket fire have instilled fear and uncertainty among the residents of Tel Aviv. In a statement regarding the escalating situation in Israel, President Joe Biden expressed deep concern and sorrow over the horrifying attack that has resulted in the loss of more than 1,000 innocent lives, including at least 27 Americans. He condemned the, preparators, stating that they make even extremist groups like Al-Qaeda appear relatively restrained, characterizing them as pure evil. Let's listen in to what the US President had to say on the current situation.
I also want to say a word about the situation in Israel. The more we learn about the attack, the more horrifying it becomes. More than 1,000 innocent lives lost, including at least 27 Americans. These guys make Al-Qaeda look pure. They're pure evil. As I said from the beginning, the United States, make no mistake about it, stands with Israel. The United States stands with Israel. Secretary of State Blinken was in Israel yesterday, and Secretary of Defense Austin is there today. We're making sure Israel has what it needs to defend itself and to respond to these attacks. It's also a priority for me to urgently address the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. At my direction, our teams are working in the region, including communicating directly with the governments of Israel, Egypt, Jordan, and other Arab nations, and the United Nations to surge support and humanitarian consequences for Hamas attack to help Israel. You know, we can't lose sight of the fact that the overwhelming majority of Palestinians had nothing to do with Hamas and Hamas's appalling attacks, and they're suffering as a result as well. This morning, I spoke with the family members of all those Americans who are still unaccounted for on a Zoom call for about an hour and 10, 15 minutes. They're going through agony, not knowing what the status of their sons, daughters, husbands, wives, children are. You know, it's gut-wrenching. I assured them my personal commitment to do everything possible to return every missing American to their families. We're working round the clock to secure the release of Americans held by Hamas in close cooperation with Israel and our partners around the region. We're not going to stop till we bring them home.
The president underlined the unwavering support of the United States for Israel, emphasizing that both Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin have been actively engaged with Israeli officials to ensure they have the necessary resources to defend themselves and respond to these attacks. Furthermore, President Biden recognized the urgent need to address the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. He disclosed that his administration's team are actively working in the region and are in direct communication with various governments, including Israel, Egypt, Jordan, and other Arab nations, as well as the United Nations. Now, their collective goal is to provide support and address the humanitarian consequences of Hamas's attacks, while assisting Israel in these challenging times. The streets of Gaza City looked desolated on Friday, with abandoned cars, scattered debris and destroyed building facades, as Israel's military called for civilians to relocate south within 24 hours ahead of an expected ground invasion. Blasts from airstrikes continued to ring out over the city of more than 1 million people, and dark plumes of smoke rose across the skyline as Israeli warplanes continued pounding Gaza in retaliation for the weekend attacks by Hamas terrorists that killed more than 1,300 Israelis. The bombardment of Gaza Strip, home to 2.3 million people, has left more than 1,500 Palestinians dead. The Israeli military said it would operate significantly in Gaza City in the coming days, and civilians would only be able to return when another announcement was made. Israel has vowed to annihilate the Hamas terrorist group which led the attacks on Saturday. Moving on, we have an important update on the ongoing conflict in the region by the IDF spokesperson Jonathan Conricus, who is providing a situational update on the war against Hamas. Let's hear what he has to say.
And its surroundings to move north, to move south and evacuate themselves to this place here, the Gaza River, in order to be safer and in order to not be in an area where we are going to enhance our military operations. We use the words significant military operations. We do this, we advertised our intentions in advance, not because it has any military logic, it doesn't, because we want civilians not to be affected by the war. We didn't put those civilians there. They are not our enemy. We are not trying to kill or injure any civilians. We are fighting against Hamas. That needs to be abundantly clear. We are fighting and targeting Hamas and its military infrastructure wherever it is. That's where we targeted, and we have targeted around the Gaza Strip and in the northern part of the Gaza Strip. We have seen a significant movement of Palestinian civilians towards the south, and that's all over the news. We have seen people listening to our warning, understanding that they are doing the clever thing, moving out of a dangerous area, and that they are doing the right thing for their family and their own safety. Extremely sad and worrying to see is the fact that Hamas actively undermines and has tried to stop Palestinian civilians from evacuating that area, both via messages and also checkpoints and stops on the ground, according to reports made by international media. That, I think, is the peak of cynicism, the fact that Hamas not only holds civilians as their human shields, not only does Hamas embed itself within the civilian population and tries to use them as a disguise, not only do they hide their infrastructure underneath the civilian infrastructure, not all of those things combined, and also when we ask the civilians to evacuate, Hamas tries to stop it. Hopefully, Palestinians will do that as fast as possible, vacate the area for their own security, and return only when we tell them that it is safe to do so. Around the Gaza Strip, as have been for many days, are Israeli reserve soldiers in formation that are getting ready for the next stage of operations. They are all around the Gaza Strip, in the south, in the center, and in the north, and they are preparing themselves for whatever target they will get, whatever task. As I've said before, our aim is very clear. The end state of this war is that we will dismantle Hamas and its military capabilities and fundamentally change the situation so that Hamas never again has the ability to inflict any damage on Israeli civilians or soldiers. Moving on to the northern front, after a few days that were a little bit quieter, I'd like to focus on an event that happened in the western sector of the border, in this area here. Hezbollah fighters fired an anti-tank missile towards Israeli troops. There was a short battle, and the situation eventually calmed down. Afterwards, Hezbollah sent drones into Israel and also fired surface-to-air missiles against an Israeli aircraft. All of those two attempts were successfully intercepted by the IDF, but the situation on the northern border remains very tense, and we are monitoring the activities of Hezbollah very closely with additional enhanced capabilities in the north, prepared for any eventuality that may happen. As we mark a week after this bloody attack against Israel, I draw faith and strength from the level of unity in Israel and from the level of cohesion and battle readiness of Israeli soldiers. And there's ample evidence of that out on social media and in the regular media, and I think that is very, very important to see. A few issues that have been spoken about in the media that I wish to clarify and emphasize, and to make abundantly clear. The Palestinian civilians in Gaza are not our enemies. We don't assess them as such, and we don't target them as such. If they were, obviously the situation in Gaza would be totally different. We are trying to do the right thing. We are trying to evacuate civilians in order to minimize the risk for them, and it is extremely sad and regrettable that so many media outlets are focusing on our actions instead of putting the responsibility on the entity that governs the Gaza Strip, and that is Hamas. They are the ones who initiated this war. They are the ones who targeted our civilians. They are the ones who continue to fire rockets at Israel. And by the way, as Israelis were sitting down or perhaps rising from their Shabbat dinner, sirens sounded in Tel Aviv and in central Israel, and they have been sounding in southern Israel over the entire day. Rockets are still being fired at Israel. So all of this is Hamas is doing. We are responding to the situation. We are trying not to strike civilians or their infrastructure, and I think that should be recognized and respected in the world and not criticized. Last thing, positive developments, and very, very important. We've had high-level visits by various ministers of foreign affairs. On the picture you can see the top picture, Ursula von der Leyen from the European Commission, of course, Lloyd Austin, Secretary of Defense from the US, together with our Deputy Chief of Staff, General Baram, and with the Ministry of Defense, and the Federal Minister of Foreign Affairs of Germany. In addition to them, the Italian Foreign Minister, also visited the battle sites, and here you can see additional pictures of the two visits. The point being that European and American leaders are sending a clear message that they stand by Israel, that they understand that this act of atrocity against Israel is not another round of conflict, and that they fully support our right to defend ourselves against these monsters. I think that's a very monsters on my word. That's not what the minister said, but that is the essence of what we're saying here. And I think that is incredibly, very, very important that the world remembers. We're 1 week after the atrocity. Remember how it started. We will likely evolve into additional significant combat operations. When we do so, remember how this started. Not by our initiative, not by our choice, and definitely not by the targets that we chose to make. All of this is Hamas making. I hope you find this useful. As always, if you have comments, suggestions, if there are things that are of interest and you want us to speak about them, please tell us so. And until then, I wish you all the best.
Moving on now, my colleague Neha Khanna spoke to a member of the Israeli Knesset from the Liquid Party. Let's take a look.
Hanush Milvitsky, thank you so much for joining us here on News 9 Live tonight. If I could begin by asking you about exactly what David mentioned just now. Just about an hour or so ago, it was announced that the Prime Minister and the opposition are coming together to form an emergency unity government to respond to this crisis. Could you please put this into perspective for our viewers? What does this really mean? What is the way ahead for Israel at the moment politically?
It means that everybody understands that there's no room for politics when Israel is fighting for its life. And this is what is happening here. We're fighting for our life. We're fighting for our way of living. We're fighting for the future of our daughters and sons. And everybody understands that. Therefore, everybody agrees to put politics aside. And all of us will unite behind this united new government, behind the army, behind our soldiers, until we complete a total victory on those enemies who want to come and kill us. This is what they want to do. They want to kill us. They have shown it too well this past Saturday. The horrors are inconceivable, really. Things that the last time Jews suffered such horrors were under the Nazi regime. We will not let anybody treat us as the Nazis did anymore, and we will treat these Hamas murderers like everybody should treat the Nazis. No mercy and no surrender.
Well, you know, both of you are absolutely right in pointing out that it's not just the scale of these horrific attacks, it's the savagery, the butchery that was involved that has really, shocked the entire world. It is blood-curdling to say the least, the way children have been treated, babies decapitated, the way women have been treated. There is a lot to talk about, Mr. Milvitsky. If I could just ask you this first. We'll talk about the airstrikes in a moment, but are there fears that there could still be Hamas terrorists holed up inside Israeli cities and towns, and they could still attack your country from within, given that at least 1,500 bodies of Hamas terrorists have already been recovered from Israeli territory, and we really don't know how many managed to sneak into Israel on Saturday?
Yes, the army is moving under that side exactly. The towns and villages that Hamas got hold of are being scanned at the moment, done very slowly. A lot of forces are still over there. And we understand that this is something that could happen. A few terrorists will rise from somewhere, but that is not something that will stop us. And we are now pretty much over the defensive period, and we are looking towards the offensive time. And I think this is something that everybody will see not too much time, that we are moving to a very enhanced offensive.
They picked my husband. He was tortured there for 2 years. He was enforced disappeared. We had no idea where he is. Within 15 minutes, we got the information that the whole area is surrounded by Pakistan Army. I came out from that in disguise, and after 5 to 6 hours, I was in Kandahar. I don't have any message for Pakistan. There is no politician in Pakistan. They are puppets of Pakistan Army.
Streaming now. This and more streaming on world's first news OTT, News 9 Plus. Download now.
In a quiet corner of India's Goa, in the home of a retired Rear Admiral of the Indian Navy, lies a centuries-old samurai sword that was once owned by a World War II fighter pilot. Today, it could be worth millions, and you and I must return it. Intrigued? It all begins with Group Captain CGI Philip. He was a veteran of the Royal Indian Air Force, fighting Imperial Japanese forces in Burma during World War II. Yet one thought troubled the veteran, a half-forgotten memory of an IJA officer. Group Captain Philip could recall how the proud officer had surrendered a priceless family heirloom, a katana. In his final years, Group Captain Philip had but one last wish, a desire to return the sword to its rightful owner. This is the sword that Group Captain Philip brought back from World War II. At around 3 feet from the handle to the tapering edge, it weighs about 2.5 kgs. The blade is blackened with age, the ornamentation worn and fading. A jaded family crest is still visible, though it's difficult to decipher. But there's no doubt. This is a traditional katana, once sported proudly by Japan's famed samurai.